I want you to ask yourself a question, like a really serious question. What would you do if you suddenly had $42 billion in liquid cash?
Oh, man. That's an unimaginable amount of money.
Right. I mean, seriously, take a moment and just think about it, because for most individuals in that ultra elite bracket, the answers usually follow a pretty predictable script, you know?
Yeah, they definitely do.
You might start like a vanity aerospace company to colonize Mars, or maybe you fund some massive philanthropic initiative to eradicate a specific disease.
Or you just buy a major global social media platform.
Exactly, because you want to control the public square, right? Those are the standard billionaire plays. But in 2023, a notoriously reclusive tech magnate, Arthur Sterling, liquidated his controlling shares in 3 major conglomerates, and, well, he pursued literally none of those options.
He went in a completely different direction.
A completely different direction. Instead, he took that massive fortune and purchased a nameless, jagged volcanic rock in the furious, freezing latitudes of the South Atlantic.
Just the middle of nowhere.
Total isolation. A desolate location that local sailors colloquially refer to as the Devil's Anvil.
Which is, precisely the kind of remote, inhospitable environment you'd expect a classic supervillain to select for a secret headquarters.
Oh, 100%.
The international press completely wrote him off. The dominant narrative at the time was just that Sterling had finally buckled under the immense psychological pressure of his empire and, suffered a complete break from reality.
That was definitely the consensus. Everyone thought he lost his mind. And for today's deep dive, we are pulling from the fascinating source narrative, The Mirror at the Devil's Anvil.
It's such a wild source.
It really is. Our mission today is to thoroughly unpack the extreme, intensely paranoid architecture of Sterling's bizarre construction project. We're going to understand the absolute mind-bending artifact he chose to bury down there.
And, of course, explore the genuinely terrifying paradox of possessing absolute knowledge of your own future.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this, because what happened on that South Atlantic rock was an 18-month logistical ballet that just seemingly defies all conventional logic.
It's unprecedented.
We are talking about satellite imagery capturing private cargo ships, offloading thousands upon thousands of tons of raw materials onto an uninhabitable island.
Just mountains of supplies.
My first thought, and I assume the intelligence community's first thought, was that he was hiding something physical and dangerous.
Like a weapon.
Yeah, like a rogue nuclear warhead, perhaps. Or testing some highly volatile chemical weapon that required total geographic isolation.
The intelligence community certainly had those exact theories on their whiteboards, but the actual blueprints, which eventually leaked, revealed something much stranger.
Way stranger.
Sterling wasn't building a conventional facility. He was constructing an inverted tower. A highly specialized fortress aimed straight down, drilling 800 feet directly into the Earth's mantle beneath the ocean floor.
800 feet down. It's just insane.
And the specific materials he imported tell a really fascinating story about his intentions. The outer walls of this subterranean structure were lined with massive quantities of barium sulfate.
Which is used for, wait, what is that used for again?
Well, from a strictly physics and engineering standpoint, you only utilize barium sulfate at that scale when you need to construct a perfect shield against all known forms of ionizing radiation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And inside that primary shell, contractors installed a thick layer of shock-absorbing aerogel, which is one of the lightest solid materials in existence. It's highly effective at dampening kinetic energy.
So he is terrified of an impact. Or like an explosion.
Not an explosion.
Yeah.
He was terrified of variables. The final chamber itself was a perfect sphere, and it was entirely suspended in a vacuum-sealed magnetic field.
Wait, I need to pause on that. A vacuum-sealed magnetic field. How does that even physically work to isolate a room?
So magnetic levitation literally suspends the inner spherical chamber in midair within a larger cavity. Because the space between the outer wall and the suspended sphere is a complete vacuum, meaning there is no air, no matter, no physical connection whatsoever. Physical vibrations just cannot travel across the gap.
Because there's nothing for the sound or vibration to travel through.
Exactly. That means absolutely no seismic tremor, not even a microscopic millimeter vibration from the shifting tectonic plates of the Earth could reach the center of this room. It is absolute physical isolation from the universe.
Which brings me to the massive contradiction at the center of this entire endeavor. I mean, the fundamental purpose of a vault is to keep malicious actors out, right?
Generally, yes.
You build an impenetrable fortress to protect your gold reserves, your priceless art, or your proprietary data servers. But the leaked blueprints for this magnetically levitated, radiation-shielded spherical room showed no infrastructure for anything.
Nothing at all.
No overhead lights, no security cameras, no fiber optic data cables. It's basically an inverted sensory deprivation tank on a billion-dollar scale. So why spend the GDP of a small nation to build the ultimate fortress, just to keep an empty room in absolute terrifying isolation?
To resolve that contradiction, we really have to examine the only outsider who was ever invited to the Devil's Anvil. Sterling didn't build a vault to keep thieves out. He built a quarantine zone to keep something contained.
A quarantine zone.
Right. And to verify if his temporal quarantine was mathematically sound, he brought in Dr. Eris Thorne. She is a theoretical physicist whose primary area of focus is quantum entropy.
Meaning she studies how systems break down.
More specifically, she studies the fundamental arrow of time. Entropy is the measure of disorder in a closed system.
Like things decaying over time.
Exactly. It is the reason a shattered teacup doesn't spontaneously reassemble itself.
Yeah.
She analyzes how reality decays and introduces variables at a subatomic level.
So she gets flown into this desolate rock on a blacked-out helicopter, completely stripped of her phone, her smartwatch, every single piece of electronics.
Nothing digital is allowed.
Right. Sterling personally guides her into this massive industrial elevator, and they just start plummeting past layer after layer of reinforced bedrock and concrete.
I must have been so claustrophobic.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the security apparatus down there is so stubbornly analog, it's actually brilliant. When they finally hit the bottom, Sterling doesn't use a retinal scanner or a biometric thumbprint. He uses a massive 64-digit mechanical keypad to unlock the final airlock.
Because any digital security system, no matter how advanced, relies on external data relays. It can be hacked, it can be spoofed, or manipulated by an outside variable.
Right.
A mechanical keypad is a completely closed loop. It requires direct, physical, intentional interaction to function, which systematically eliminates remote interference.
Because variables, as Dr. Thorne was about to discover, were the ultimate enemy here.
Exactly. When that heavy titanium airlock finally swung open, breaking the vacuum seal, Sterling gave her a very specific warning. He told her not to touch the object resting inside, and crucially, not to look at it for too long.
Which is an impossible request, honestly, because sitting in the exact center of this featureless, pitch black spherical room is a single pedestal. And resting on that pedestal is an artifact.
Just sitting there in the dark.
Yeah. It looks deceptively simple, essentially the size and shape of a standard dressing room mirror, framed in an unknown matte black metallic substance.
A mirror.
Right. Sterling explains that it wasn't manufactured by any human process. It was salvaged, pulled from the lightless depths of a deep-sea trench off the Mariana.
The bottom of the ocean.
Here's where it gets really interesting. As Dr. Thorne steps closer to the artifact, she realizes the glass is not reflecting the room as it currently exists. It is reflecting the exact spatial coordinates of the spherical chamber, but displaced precisely 365 days into the future.
It functions as a localized temporal fracture, a literal, real-time window into exactly 1 year from the current moment.
I mean, the geopolitical implications of that are staggering. Imagine placing this artifact in a corporate boardroom or a military command center. You could simply set up a digital monitor facing the glass, and the mirror would show you whatever data is displayed on that monitor a year from now.
It's an infinite advantage.
It represents an asymmetric geopolitical advantage that renders all human strategy obsolete. You could read tomorrow's global market fluctuations, intercept the outcomes of democratic elections, or foresee military strikes before the orders are even drafted.
You'd essentially be a god.
It is a tool for total planetary dominance. And yet, instead of leveraging it to become a god among men, Arthur Sterling chooses to bury it beneath the ocean floor. Why spend a fortune to hide an oracle of infinite power in a pitch black hole?
What's fascinating here is the devastating mechanism of the feedback loop. This is precisely why a quantum entropy specialist like Dr. Thorne was brought into the equation.
The feedback loop.
Right. We have to consider how human choice and temporal mechanics interact. If a person views the future, the immediate, inescapable human instinct is to alter their behavior based on that new knowledge.
Of course, you try to fix it or profit from it.
Exactly. But the moment you take action, you fundamentally alter the variables of the present moment. And if the present changes, the future must inevitably shift to reflect that new trajectory.
Okay, take that concept, but multiply it by infinity. because this mirror reflects the future in real time.
It's real time.
If you place that artifact in a heavily populated area, say the middle of Manhattan, you are introducing millions of unpredictable autonomous variables. Someone looks into the glass, sees a tragic accident happening tomorrow, and decides to intervene. They change their route.
And just like that, the future is altered.
The future is altered. The mirror instantly updates to display this new, altered reality.
Then someone else observes that new reality in the mirror. They react to it, making a different financial investment or different political choice.
Oh.
The present shifts again. The mirror must update a third time, and a fourth, and a billionth.
Just constantly recalculating.
The artifact would be forced to process billions of shifting, contradictory realities every single millisecond. The glass would enter an infinite flicker. The localized space-time surrounding the mirror wouldn't just become unstable. It would literally buckle and fracture under the processing weight of infinite, unresolved timelines. Space-time would collapse inward on itself.
It's the visual equivalent of putting a live microphone too close to a speaker. You get that deafening, escalating screech of audio feedback.
That's a perfect analogy.
But instead of an annoying sound, it's the fabric of reality itself tearing apart at the seams, which frames Sterling's paranoid, isolated darkroom not as madness, but as an act of absolute genius.
He wasn't hiding the mirror from his rivals. He was stabilizing the artifact.
Right.
By sealing it within a vacuum, blocking all radiation, eliminating all light, and preventing any human access, he successfully created a zero-change environment.
He achieved artificial zero entropy. In a perfectly static, perfectly empty, dark room, the future is fundamentally identical to the present. There is no change.
Exactly. The mirror simply reflects the dark. The feedback loop is permanently closed, and the temporal fracture remains stable. As Sterling bluntly explained to Thorne, he had to bury the future in order to save the present.
The logic is mathematically sound. It is the equivalent of hitting pause on a temporal bomb. But there is a glaring, unavoidable flaw in his execution.
Oh, a massive flaw.
The room was perfectly stabilized, absolutely, until Sterling authorized that elevator descent and walked Dr. Thorne through the airlock.
They broke the seal.
By physically entering that spherical chamber, they shattered the zero entropy state. They introduced a biological, unpredictable variable. The room was no longer empty. So if the artifact is permanently locked to reflect exactly 365 days ahead, what exactly was waiting for them in the glass?
They observed a visceral nightmare.
Yeah.
When Dr. Thorne peered into the temporal glass, the room a year from that exact moment was not the silent, pristine vault they were standing in. She saw her own future self.
Oh, man.
And the future Dr. Thorne wasn't calmly recording data. She was in a state of absolute frantic terror. She was violently pounding her bare fists against the inside of the mirror, her mouth wide open in a soundless, desperate scream.
That is just horrifying.
Behind her, the supposedly impregnable, foot-thick titanium walls of the spherical chamber were grotesquely buckled inward. The state-of-the-art vacuum seals had catastrophically ruptured, and millions of gallons of freezing high-pressure seawater were violently roaring into the room from a breach in the ceiling.
So the future version of Thorne is seconds away from drowning. It is a deeply personal, visceral horror, and it instantly generates an impossible, immovable timeline.
The ultimate paradox.
Sterling realizes the paradox immediately. They are currently standing in a pristine vault that they are about to seal, lock with a 64-digit code, and abandon forever. Mathematically, there is absolutely no logical reason why an MIT physicist should find herself trapped at the bottom of a flooded subterranean shaft in the South Atlantic in exactly 1 year.
None at all.
Yet the mirror operates on temporal law. It does not display possibilities, it displays the hardened future. Sterling turns to her and asks a chilling, inescapable question. He says, "What makes you come back?"
It is the ultimate expression of a determinism paradox. Once an observer views the hardened future, their timeline becomes inextricably bound to it.
Think about how you would process that psychological burden, you, the listener. It is the classic Greek tragedy structure, like Oedipus, actively attempting to flee his terrible prophecy, only to discover his flight is the very mechanism that ensures it comes to pass.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Knowing the exact time, date, and location of your own violent death. How does a brilliant mind, someone who understands the mathematics of cause and effect, navigate the knowledge that any action taken to avoid that flooded room might be the precise catalyst that puts her inside it?
Well, she weaponizes her own field of study. Thorne attempts to enforce absolute zero entropy on her own existence.
How does a person even do that?
Her strategy is total, paralyzing inaction. For 342 days, she and Sterling maintain strict radio silence. They walk away from the island. Thorne returns to Massachusetts, resumes her lectures at MIT, and essentially tries to freeze her own timeline.
She just tries to do nothing.
She meticulously eliminates variables from her daily routine. She refuses to travel, refuses to engage in new relationships, and isolates herself in her apartment, terrified that a single microscopic deviation from her routine will initiate the chain of events leading her back to the devil's anvil.
I cannot imagine the psychological torture of those 342 days. It relates so deeply to how we function as humans, you know? We constantly paralyze ourselves with anxiety over future outcomes, often creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure simply because we are too terrified to make a move.
We freeze up.
Yeah. Thorne is trying to outweight the universe, but of course, the universe always wins. On day 343, her desperate strategy of inaction is violently derailed. The inciting incident is a global news alert. Tech billionaire Arthur Sterling has been killed in a catastrophic private jet crash over the Pacific.
The external variable has finally been introduced, and it is entirely outside of her control.
2 hours after the news breaks, Thorne receives a heavily encrypted automated email. It was configured as a dead man's switch, hardwired to trigger the moment Sterling's biometrics flatlined.
A contingency plan.
Right. The payload contains a live military-grade satellite feed focused on the Devil's Anvil, the 64-digit mechanical passcode required to open the final airlock, and a single desperate message from Sterling. It just says, they know what it is.
And the live satellite feed provides the terrifying context. 3 unmarked, heavily armed mercenary dreadnoughts are rapidly converging on the jagged coastline of the island.
So it wasn't an accident.
Sterling wasn't the victim of mechanical failure. He was surgically assassinated by a private corporate syndicate. And these mercenaries aren't interested in the titanium walls. They're bringing heavy, deep earth equipment to forcibly breach the vault and haul the temporal artifact up to the surface.
So what does this all mean for Dr. Thorne? Because my immediate instinctual reaction is to let them have it.
Just walk away.
Yeah. If I am Thorne, and I have spent nearly a year having nightmares about drowning in that specific room, I am barricading my door in Massachusetts. Why not let this heavily armed syndicate breach the vault, let the ocean flood in and drown the mercenaries instead? She could just stay home and survive.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Thorne understands the devastating physics of the mirror better than anyone alive.
Ah, right. The feedback loop.
Exactly. If a rogue syndicate successfully drags that artifact out of its zero-entropy quarantine and brings it to the surface, exposing it to the sunlight, to global geopolitical conflicts, to a chaotic world of 8 billion human beings constantly making unpredictable choices, the artifact will immediately attempt to render the shifting future. It will try to process infinite variables simultaneously.
The infinite feedback loop we discussed earlier.
Exactly that process, but on a planetary scale. Space-time wouldn't merely fracture within the confines of the Devil's Anvil. The sheer processing weight of the contradictory timelines would shatter the fabric of reality itself.
Wow.
Thorne experiences a profound, sickening paradigm shift. The mirror hadn't shown her a tragic accident she needed to avoid. It had assigned her a mission she was temporally obligated to complete. She wasn't looking at her punishment. She was looking at the unavoidable price of preserving human existence.
The Oracle forces her hand, which brings us to the 365th day. The exact anniversary of the timeline. Thorne bypasses the surface conflict entirely by utilizing a retrofitted, stealth-capable submersible.
Going in under the radar.
Yeah, she navigates the treacherous underwater volcanic ridges and successfully docks at a submerged emergency egress hatch that Sterling had secretly integrated into the elevator shaft. Above her, the situation is rapidly deteriorating.
The mercenaries are working fast.
The mercenary syndicate is actively dropping sonic deep earth breaching charges into the bedrock. They have no concern for the structural integrity of the vault. They just want to expose the payload.
It becomes a literal race against the collapse of space-time. Thorne rappels down the dark, freezing expanse of the elevator shaft, while these massive seismic detonations violently shake the island's foundation.
Just explosions going off everywhere.
Right. She finally reaches the bottom, punches the 64-digit mechanical sequence into the keypad, and the massive titanium airlock slowly swings inward.
The spherical chamber is exactly as she left it. Pitch black, silent, the artifact resting undisturbed on its pedestal. Thorne steps into the center of the room, tightly gripping a heavy tungsten wrench she retrieved from the submersible. But here is where the temporal physics completely break my brain. When she looks into the dark glass, preparing for the end, She does not see her future.
We have to break down the mechanics of the temporal displacement very carefully. Think of the mirror as a two-way radial pipeline connecting two highly specific points in time.
Okay, a pipeline.
Date A is the exact moment they first entered the vault a year ago. Date B is exactly 365 days later, the present moment for Thorn. It operates as a perfectly closed circuit. When Thorn stands in front of the mirror on day B, she is standing at the extreme receiving end of that temporal signal.
So the artifact is always projecting a year ahead, but because she has reached the end of that specific year-long pipeline.
Precisely. She is looking back through the pipeline at date A. The mirror doesn't show her the future because she is the future. The loop closes perfectly. The artifact loops backward and shows her the past.
Man, that is wild. She sees her past self and a living Arthur Sterling, standing just outside the doorway, staring in at her with expressions of absolute uncomprehending horror. She realizes with absolute clarity that she is looking at the precise moment the hardened timeline was forged. She is the terrifying, frantic specter they were staring at a year ago.
And right at that exact moment of realization, the mercenary forces above breach the critical threshold of the bedrock. A massive, concentrated deep earth charge detonates directly above the vault.
This is it.
The entire 800-foot deep structure violently lurches. The impregnable titanium walls, exactly as she witnessed a year ago, grotesquely buckle inward with a horrific shriek of tearing metal. The vacuum seals shatter, the ceiling tears open, and millions of gallons of freezing black, high-pressure seawater roar directly into the chamber.
The kinetic force slams her to her knees. The freezing water is instantly rising past her throat. She looks toward the mirror, and in the glass, her past self is watching her drown, eyes wide with terror. But this is the genius twist of the entire narrative. This is the ultimate aha moment, where the physics, the psychology, and the timeline perfectly align.
It all comes together.
Thorn realizes her past self wasn't watching her drown in a panic, and a year ago, she hadn't been frantically pounding her fists against the glass in a desperate attempt to escape the room.
The physical context changes the entire meaning of the vision. What initially appeared to be the desperate, uncoordinated flailing of a drowning woman trying to break out of a watery grave was actually the deliberate, agonizing physical resistance of swinging a heavy, solid object against the density of rushing water.
Yes. She's pulling her arm back through the rushing, freezing current to swing that tungsten wrench. She wasn't trying to escape the room. She was trying to shatter the oracle.
Fighting the water.
Fighting the violent surge of the ocean, with her last breath of air, she locks eyes with her past self through the temporal glass, and she swings the heavy metal wrench directly into the center of the impossible artifact.
The matte black glass finally shatters. And in that singular fraction of a second, the reflection, the path, and the terrifying future all dissolve into the dark, silent, crushing depths of the South Atlantic.
It's just over.
By actively destroying the mirror before the mercenary syndicate could drag it to the surface, she successfully prevented the infinite feedback loop from collapsing space-time. She had to fulfill the terrifying prophecy in order to definitively end the prophecy.
Imagine standing in her shoes at that exact moment, holding that heavy tungsten wrench, the freezing water rising above your head, and realizing that the horrifying future you spent an entire year dreading, the nightmare that mentally paralyzed you and dictated your every move, was actually just you doing exactly what had to be done to save reality.
It's incredibly profound.
It is such a profound, lingering lesson on how a lack of context completely distorts our reality. We judge our worst fears based on woefully incomplete information. Absolute, unyielding knowledge of the future is not a tactical gift. It is a crushing, paralyzing burden that the human mind was simply never designed to carry.
It is remarkable narrative regarding the illusion of control. But reviewing the complete data from the source material, this raises an important question. A deeply unsettling detail that the narrative leaves unresolved. We just established definitively that the artifact violently shatters reality when it is exposed to the shifting variables of human choice, which is exactly why Sterling spent billions to bury it in a vacuum.
The infinite variables.
Right. So considering those physics, how on earth did Arthur Sterling's original highly chaotic deep-sea expedition manage to safely pull that temporal artifact out of the Mariana Trench in the first place?
Wait, oh my God.
Think of the thousands of unpredictable variables involved in a massive nautical salvage operation. The shifting ocean currents, the chaotic actions of the crew members, the complex transport back to dry land. What horrific, localized space-time events or alternate collapsing realities had to be ruthlessly sacrificed just to get that mirror to the surface of the ocean before Sterling finally realized he had to bury it again.
The body count of alternate timelines required just to load that thing onto a cargo ship must be staggering. It completely reframes Sterling's initial madness. That is a chilling, lingering thought to leave you with as you go about your day. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the reality around you, and we'll catch you next time.